Welcome to Service Done Right, a video series dedicated to transforming technical service. I'm your host, DJ Biersack, and I'm joined by Reach CEO and founder, Greg Biersack.
DJ, it's great to be with you.
Likewise. In today's episode, we are going to be talking about ownership thinking. So to get started, I'm going to ask you a couple questions off the bat and talk to you about what ownership thinking is and how is that applicable to your company and the service industry as a whole. So first question I have is, one of the keys to success at Reach, you've said, is that everybody thinks like an owner. Now, can you tell me what that means and why is this so important to you and your company?
To me, the success of a good company is the ability for everybody who's part of the company to think as if it were their company. And the more that you can get people to think about it as if it's their company,
Right.
the better decisions they're going to make. Now, that's not a real easy thing to do, right? It takes some time to be able to set that up, and you have to think about it in advance about how do you create an environment where people really think of themselves as an owner of the company. So part of it comes in the processes or the policies that you set in place. A big part of it comes in the education.
Right.
And if your people are well educated to understand the business, particularly the financial part of the business, it gives them the absolute best chance to think like an owner. And so I'll give you an example of something that we did. It's called the penny exercise, and it was something fun that we did. And not everybody has had a chance to have a lot of experience working within the finances of a company.
Sure.
And so how do you create something where people can really wrap their minds around it and see it in a pretty easy to see fashion? And so we did the penny exercise. And the penny exercise was everybody had 100 pennies, and everybody's spread out because all of our people are spread out all over the place. And so we said, okay, everybody, I want you sitting at a table, and you're going to have 100 pennies there in front of you. And we started off by saying, okay, where did the 100 pennies come from? Right? So we said, okay, some of the pennies are coming from labor, and some of the pennies are coming from parts, and some of the pennies are coming from rentals, right? So we kind of said, here's where all these pennies came from. So now everybody has this pile of 100 pennies in front of them. They go, oh, okay, now I understand kind of where this all comes from. And then we said, okay, now we're going to start to talk about where do all the pennies go. And we started to push the pennies to the side. And we'd say, okay, here's the pennies that you got to push to the side to pay for the parts. Here's the pennies you got to push to the side to pay for the freight, for the visa fees, for you, for your benefits. And you start to push all those pennies to the side. And people understand, wow, I didn't expect that there'd be so many pennies that would go towards freight, right? Or the different things. And so by the time they're done, they're like, wow, there's only a few pennies left here in the middle. And going through that exercise with everybody just help people think about all these aspects that go into it, all the aspects that go into the finances of the company. And the overwhelming feeling from everybody at the end of the penny exercise was, man, I better understand how things work now. And I can make so much better choices, the kind of choices I would make if I was an owner, the kind of choices I would make if there were 3 pennies left at the end, right? And so to me, that is so rewarding to help people understand how does it work from the finances and how are those decisions made, because then people can really make the absolute best choices. And so taking that penny exercise just a little bit further, when a technician now is working with a client and there is freight that's involved. So let's say, for example, a client needs a part and it needs to be overnight shipped from the East Coast out to Portland, Oregon. That's going to be really expensive. If you really didn't understand the finances of the company, if you didn't have that sense of ownership, right, it would be really easy to undervalue that freight cost.
Sure.
But now that they understand, if I don't handle this freight piece right, if I don't really take ownership of that, those 3 pennies go away.
Exactly.
And now all of a sudden they say, okay, I'm going to make this best choice for the company because I'm thinking like an owner.
Right.
And it's really incredibly rewarding when you give that people the chance to really think like an owner and to be rewarded like an owner. I mean, that's one of the things that's really important as well, that a technician, an employee, I mean, it's not just the technicians at Reed's, it's an employee. If those employees have a chance to be able to share in the profitability that they created,
right,
now it ratchets up their real sense of ownership. They're not doing it just for somebody else.
Right.
They're doing it because when they think like an owner, they know that they have a chance to be rewarded like an owner as well. And so pretty cool experience to be able to have.
And so as an owner, is that something that you would recommend to other entrepreneurs and other people starting a business, just really establishing from the beginning that ownership thinking piece? Is that was at the core when you started the company? So is that something that you would recommend to other people, as they are starting their company or a venture or something new or sharing a new idea, is establishing this idea of being an owner and understanding all of these different things we just talked about?
Oh, without a doubt, 100%. And so, a favorite book that I've read that I use in the class. So I teach marketing at University of Washington, Tacoma. And it's one of the things that I share with my students to get them to think about things in a little different way. So anybody who is starting a company, anybody who's in a company, in the sense of or in a position of leadership, I really encourage them to think about that as well. A renter mentality is a really dangerous place for a company, because people aren't encouraged nor rewarded to make the best choices as if they own the place. And so, I'll give you a real quick example. We've got a niece whose husband is a dentist, so he runs a dental practice, and we were talking about all these principles too, because I think that he was feeling like, how do I enroll the team as much as possible in what we're doing? And we talked about these things about, how do you put processes in place that allow somebody to have a real sense of ownership? How do you elevate the understanding of the finances of that practice? And then how do you reward people for the profit? And this is something that I really encourage a lot of business owners to think about is how do people get a chance to get a portion of that profitability that they create, but the profit is the chance to give them a reward. Unfortunately, there's a lot of companies, I think, who give rewards that aren't necessarily tied to profit. And they get frustrated because maybe they gave out a bunch of bonuses or rewards, and at the end of the year, there wasn't anything that was more profitable for the company.
Right.
To me, that's this really super important thing that really all businesses should think about is that bonuses, rewards come from profit. Just like when you're an owner. When you're an owner, the reward comes from the profit that you create. And you want your people to think along the same lines.
There you go. Well, hey, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on ownership thinking and what it's like to be an owner and instill what it's like to be an owner in everybody that works in the company. So that wraps it up for today's video. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm your host, DJ Bresack. This is Service Done Right. I'll see you next time.